Welcome to Men Are the Prize, the podcast. I'm Harvey, your host. How are you? Another great week and a fantastic guest, a guest I have been pining for a while. So I'm thoroughly excited to have him. This is Ben Hughes. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well, Harvey. Very well, Harvey.
Excellent. Let's get into it. I'm going to read his bio and then we're just going to get into it. In early 2011, Ben Hughes stood up at a business networking meeting and said, I'm going to start a men's group. Who's in? That group is still meeting. And in 2019, him and another man, David Pointon, I'm going to hope I'm saying his name right, decided to start more groups, or as they're called, tables. There are now 59 tables. Ben lives in Launceston, Tasmania, after 30 years in Sydney. Ben lives with his partner, Julie, and two cats. The cats are in charge, as most cats are. I love that. Originally from Somerset, England, Ben has a mission to get one man a day off the couch. I love this idea. This podcast is for men to talk, and there's nothing better than creating a group for men to get together and talk. So I really wanted to talk to you about this. So thanks for giving me your time. I do appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.
Excellent. Okay, so I read your bio, but what I like to ask my guests is this. If I didn't have a chance to read your bio like I did, and I just kind of saw you on the street and I kind of knew who you were, and you had like maybe 10 or 15 seconds to introduce yourself to someone who just kind of came up on you, how would you introduce yourself? What would your quick bio be, Mr. Hughes?
Wow, quick bio. Okay. Extrovert, deeply passionate about men's work, have had plenty of knocks and bruises throughout my life, but I arrive in the place today I am because of those knocks and bruises. And my mission in life is to get one man a day off the couch.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay. So if you've listened to this podcast before, you know where I'm going. If you haven't, welcome. The podcast is called Men Are the Prize. I like the word prize, so I'm using that. That's the impetus of this whole podcast. I take letters from the word prize. I take words, and using those words, I've got characteristics that really, in my opinion, define what a good man is. So the first letter in the word prize is P. The word is purpose. Purpose is defined as a reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. So, Mr. Hughes, what is your purpose?
One man a day off the couch. So, and what does that mean? Let me explain what that means. So we run a group down here, which you've explained a little bit, called the Men's Table. We had a man who came to one of our information nights. We call them entree nights, and he said, "Look, I found myself sitting on the couch, watching too much TV and just listening to my wife organizing her social life." And whenever we say that, a lot of men go, "Yeah, that's me." I feel like that. I hear that same thing. So purpose for me is because I've been that man on the couch too. I've had some terrible times in my life through a very destructive divorce, and various other things. I found myself sitting on the couch on my own with nobody to talk to. So that purpose for me is that. And I want to really elaborate on that a lot, because I think men lose their sense of purpose quite often in life. That quite can happen when fatherhood comes around the corner and they suddenly go, where do I fit in here anymore? I used to have this beautiful relationship with this woman, and now I'm second fiddle, and maybe then third, and maybe fourth, and then a dog comes along and they're fifth, and or a couple of cats, and men lose their sense of purpose. So we see that quite often with men, and that can lead to all kinds of different problems. So that sense of purpose can be lost at fatherhood. It can be lost at retirement in particular. Men who've devoted their whole life into work and haven't fostered anything outside of that or fostered male relationships will suddenly find their sense of purpose is gone. It's been taken away from them. They haven't really put any thought or effort into what are we going to do next. And the female, if they've got a female in their life, will have built up some social networks. and he might find himself very lost. So purpose is something we talk about a lot, actually. It's really important that a man does have a sense of purpose that is over and above the family, okay? Because, otherwise it's all about the kids, it's all about the wife, it's all about making sure all the bills are paid and everything is provided for. I know that's a very traditional stereotype I'm portraying there, but it still runs true quite often. So they have to find a sense of purpose that isn't just about the family. Because one thing I learned quite early on, somebody told me, said, you can't get other people right if you're not right. So you have to put that oxygen mask on first. So find that sense of purpose. Get back on the mountain bike. Get back on the piano. Get back on the guitar. Get back on the drawing. Get back in the kitchen and cook some beautiful food. Whatever your passion is, reignite that. So as you can tell, I'm quite a passionate person around that word, and in particular, I'm using quite a few P's there nicely.
Excellent. You touched on a lot of things that I talk about on this podcast. One thing I talk about with men specifically is that we're so ingrained, we're so raised to take care of everybody else, wife, family, job, that we don't think about ourselves. And one of the analogies I use is literally just what you said. You can't really take care of everybody else if you don't take care of yourself. Literally the same thing. I'm on a plane and they tell you to put the mask on yourself before you take care of everybody else. You got it. You got my shtick down already. So that's good to hear. I wanted to ask this. So actually, I won't. What I also picked up from what you were saying is something around here that we call it like a midlife crisis. Men, we grow 18, go to college, get our job, married, kids, and we just have a job that takes care of the bills, that takes care of family, but we're not doing what we want. We're doing what we have to. So when we get the mid 40s, early 50s, that's when we find the blonde wife or girlfriend. We buy the sports car, because all the stuff that we wanted to do, we didn't get to, and then all of a sudden we feel trapped. And it happens with a lot of men. My question for you, just kind of running off of that, is that the impetus for most of the men that are at the tables, or are there different situations or circumstances that bring the men to these tables to speak?
Yeah, so let me outline what a table is. So a table is, and the bio, we moved quite quickly. I think you said 59, it went out to 66. So that's since early 2019. So a group is a table is a group of the same or so dozen men who meet at the same place, same time, same day of the month to talk about the highs and the lows of their lives. And we give them a little bit of a structure around what we call the fundamentals. So they're things like confidentiality, commitment is really important, really committing to things. And another really strong one is something we call no fixing. So no fixing is about the ability to sit and listen to somebody else's story without saying, you know what you should do, you know what you should do, or something like, you think that's bad, you should hear what happened to me. It's like that doesn't make any sense. So that's the outline of the table. Why do men come? Men come for multiple different reasons, but it's also really important for us to talk about why they don't come, which digs right into masculinity. So why they come is for multiple reasons. They might have something dramatic happening in their life, or a trigger. We call it a trigger point, which is new father, loss of job, retirement, death of somebody close to them, financial struggles, depression, anxiety. They might have that going on for them, or they might just go, I haven't really got any good male friends. I need to find some good male friends. There's nothing majorly wrong with me. Or they might be community men who like to dig in and provide a sense of community and build a community. So we offer a place where men can really have a really good conversation. And this is a bit of an Australian thing, but I don't know if you can see that. That might be backward. Hopefully that's not backward. But is it backward?
No, I can read it. We don't just
Okay.
talk about footy. Yeah, it's good. Okay.
We don't just talk
Okay.
about footy and shit. So down here, football, the codes, the different codes of football we have down here are called footy. But what a man came to us once and he said, I've got mates, but we just talk about footy and shit. And I don't want to do that all the time. I want to go and have better conversations. So we offer men a place where they can have a better conversation. So they come for all different reasons. But equally importantly, I want to talk about why men don't come. Men don't come because they may well think it's a sign of weakness to join a men's group. They may well think, oh, that's not for me. And it's only for men who have problems or have something going on for them or have a mental health issue. And that's really far, far from the truth. The fact, but that will stop them because there's the stigmas attached to that, and they think they might lose a bit of their masculinity if they join a men's group.
Right.
It's the opposite, because the courage we see from men at tables who come and talk about serious issues they've had in their lives is extraordinary. It's a very courageous thing for them to do. Some men are straight away like me. I'm like, this is going on for me. And other men are kind of, it might take them years, but we provide a place where that can actually happen. So men come for all reasons. I'm an expert at giving long answers, so I hope that all makes sense. Sometimes I get through halfway through what I'm saying, I go, what was the question again? So I'm like, bring myself back. So men come for all different reasons, but the one thing we've learned is this is about community. It really is about community. I'm a firm believer that it kind of doesn't matter what community you're in, as long as you're in one. I'm not talking about bikies and I'm not talking about criminal gangs and what have you, but a community. So community is so important.
Agreed. I love this idea. Can you give me, it seems to me like the idea, there's a lot of men who kind of resistant to the idea of maybe joining a table or going. But when a man is like, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to the table, do you find that some of these men, maybe even the idea of going is enough, maybe that first time? Do you find men find it a little difficult to kind of open up and speak that first time? Or do you have people who just, even if it's a little bit, but they're comfortable speaking? What's that first experience like for people?
When we first started doing this 11 years ago, it was very different. We've now seen a whole shift in men. I think it's global. I've certainly seen it here in Australia, that men are now more open and more willing to speak, because if they don't speak, if they don't talk about what's going on, we know that ends up in very difficult situations. So some men will come to a table and open up straight away, but what normally happens, it will take a while. It might take 6 months, it might take a year, because when you walk into a room of other men, the first thing men will do is just check out the other men. Like, who's this guy? What's this guy all about? This guy talks a lot. This guy, he's pretty quiet. He's pretty introverted. What's going on there? Oh, I didn't like what that guy had to say. So it does take a while, and it takes a huge amount of courage. And we know, if I get to the pointy end of stuff, we know that men would often take their own lives because they haven't got either the courage or the understanding of how to talk to somebody about what is going on for them. And that's a terrible place to be. It's a horrible place to be. So it depends. It really does depend. But we make it as easy as possible. But the key to the whole thing is men being vulnerable. Because at the start of a night, if a man started a story by saying, "Oh, look, I'm having trouble with my Mercedes, it's not going very well, and somebody scratched the side of it, and that doesn't really mean anything, right?" But if a man goes, "I haven't told anybody this before, this happened to me when I was a kid, and this really has affected me my whole life," and he goes into a story, what that does is it opens the door for other men to go and tell their stories too. It really is, it's that sense of vulnerability. And if you open that door and you talk about it, it allows other men to walk through that door too. So I would urge everybody, tell your story, tell everybody how you feel, be open. If you're having a shitty day, tell everybody about it. Tell them how you feel, because it allows other people to do the same thing.
Excellent. I love this idea. This is so fantastic. My podcast is a blatant copy of everything that you espouse. So I'm loving hearing this. The next letter in the word P.R.I.Z.E is R. The word is resilience. And that is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. So can you think, and you may have already described it, but I'll ask you again. Can you think of a situation that happened to you where you discovered you had resilience that you didn't know that you had?
Wow, that's a great question, isn't it? Let me unpack resilience a little, how my view on resilience, first of all. Resilience is often taken in isolation. So you will often see, how can we make this person resilient? We're firm believers that we build resilience through community. Okay, so resilience can be one person's journey quite often, but if you're sharing that journey, that's, I don't know about in America, but the word journey is kind of like, we hear that all the time. It's like, I'm on this journey, like, oh. So resilience through community, I think, is really important, and that involves having people to talk about. There's no point. Quite often in the corporate world, they talk about resilience. And they try and make people resilient. And I'll be quite honest with you, I think they try and make people resilient because they throw a whole heap of shit at them, and they want them just to be resilient for the nonsense that they're thrown. But how have I been resilient? It's a really interesting thing, because I'm privy to a lot of really difficult stories. I get to hear a lot of traumatic stories, and I have to make sure that I'm not taking that all in. So I have to be a little personally resilient to the stories I take in and what I hear. But I will answer that in a slightly different way. As I'll tell you my view of resilience. It's about community, because if you're resilient by yourself all the time, it's easier for you to crack and something to happen. And so I would urge, build resilience through community. It's a really strong way of doing it.
Okay, I like that answer. I'll go ahead, sir, please.
I'm sure there are many occurrences when I've been resilient, but I'm like blank.
It's okay. Don't worry. There's plenty to talk about. What I will ask you though is this. Now, since you've been at so many tables and you've heard so many stories, so many things, good, bad, can I ask, the first few times that you heard some men kind of elaborating on their journey, their struggles, how did you handle it the first few times you heard some really not some great things about these men?
If I look at a scenario where men are down at the bar and they're talking, and one man needs to share his difficult story, quite often he's closed down. And the reason he's closed down is men don't know how to receive that information. Okay? One guy wants to go, "Ugh," and it's weird and it's clunky, and it's like all the other men are like, "Oh, let's have another beer," or that's kind of a bit weird, John, So the first thing I think when you receive some information that is traumatic, and believe you me, men find all kinds of new ways to have trauma in their lives. I'm always like, that's a new story. I haven't heard that one before. Yeah. So I'm always amazed how many people we walk past in the street who carry these stories with them, these extraordinary stories. The first thing to do is, when you hear those stories, is acknowledge it, like empathize with it. even if it's oh my God, that sounds terrible, or that sounds really tough, or I'm really sorry to hear that, don't leave a pause, because that's when it all gets very weird for the person who shared, because I feel like, where has this landed? Where has this where it's come from? So there's always, even if it's a oh or a or something, just to empathize with that person. And then just remember that you're not there to fix that person, because you can't fix that person.
Right.
You're there to listen. And if you are asked for, so we never offer unsolicited advice. We always say, mate, can I ask you a question? Or can I, can I offer you a little bit of advice here? And quite often the man who shared the trauma will say, no, I don't need any help with this. I just needed to verbalize it. I just needed to talk it out. And on the other side of that is, I needed it to be heard. Okay. If I was telling this story in the bar and you've got the football up on the screen and you've got loud noise and somebody's trying to get another drink in and nobody's really listening, that story hasn't landed properly. So even that guy's told it, it hasn't been received. So when we hear traumatic stories, you've got to acknowledge them properly. You have to acknowledge them. And it might be awkward and it might be difficult. And then maybe ask a few questions to tease more out of that story. But don't go into the, you know what you should do kind of mode. That's really unhelpful. And men can tend to do that. Or they might deflect the story away quite quickly. But you have to sit with that story. You have to empathize with it as much as you can.
That's good. That's beautiful. I love it. As a man, I'm listening to this and I feel like women say this a lot, that sometimes they just want to get it out. And as men, I think it's natural for us to want to fix situations. And sometimes women are just, I just wanted to tell you what happened. I didn't want you to solve it. I just wanted you to hear it. So I hear that. I understand exactly what you mean. To me, and I just kind of relate this back to the podcast. I say with this was a space for men to talk. And I always like to say that, as I've heard quite a bit of stories of stuff that men are going through, but to me, it's not even what men are saying that's important. It's the fact that they're saying it. That's really important. The fact that they're talking is really the key. So, I mean, I'm in awe and I'm loving this. We're going to skip the I in the word prize, but I didn't cut you off. What were you going to say, sir?
I just want to talk about this very quickly, because it's a really important thing about what we do is the no fixing thing. And I talked about, it's like, you know what you should do, mate. None of that. We use a bit of a story around that. We call it the brother-in-law story. Okay. So if I'm man A, I'm telling my story, blah, blah, blah. This happened to me, blah, blah, blah. Man B, who sat next to me, halfway through my story, he started to think about, oh, that happened to my brother-in-law. And first of all, he stopped listening to my story. He's thinking about something else. Maybe 30 seconds later, he'll say, you know what? That happened to my brother-in-law. He's jumped into the story. And then he'll say, and I'm cutting this short, but then he'll say, oh, yeah, but he's married to my sister and she's a bit tricky. And then they've got those kids, and then they've got the mortgage stress, and then they went on holiday and they crashed a car. And then all these other things happen to them. Man A is then sitting there going, what happened to my story? Where did my story go? This guy initially thought he was trying to help. It was really clumsy and really not very good. But we notice a lot now, because of the way we run the tables, is when stories are hijacked, when people hijack your story. And I'd ask everybody just to notice that when you're telling a story that's important to you, suddenly somebody will jump in and start telling their story. You're like, well, I didn't finish. I need to finish and complete what's going on there. I just wanted to get that. I find that really important.
No, I agree. Understandable. We skip the I. The next letter in the word prize is Z. The word is zeal. Zeal is enthusiastic devotion. What are you enthusiastically devoted to?
This work. I was self-employed for quite some time, and I was I was terrible at it. I thought, yeah, this is good. I know my industry. I'm going to be I can do this. Turns out running a business was terrible, but I'm not the kind of person who can really work for anybody else. I always found that a bit difficult. About 5 years ago, I got diagnosed with off the chart ADHD, and my life just fell into place. I'm like, wow. But two things happened. First of all, I had a lot of grief about what could have been, missed opportunities. And second of all, and the other side of it, I had was a great opportunity to work with what I've got. I'm naturally a very passionate person. I will tell you exactly how I feel. I'm very fortunate to work in this space where we do men's work. And why I'm fortunate is I've been through some very dark times. I've had the suicide plan. I've been down that whole route of being lost and very despondent, to the point where there was no hope, really. Terrible place. And I'll tell you right now, my life is wonderful. I live in Tasmania, which is right off the bottom of Australia. It is bloody cold, but it is gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the world. It's rugged. It's full of amazing walks. The pace of life is a bit slower. I was in Sydney for 30 years. I've got a beautiful partner. We've got 2 cats. We've got, got a nice house, got a great view. Life is really good for me right now. But that too shall pass, okay? I'm aware that too shall pass. It can't always be like this. And it wasn't always like that. And what I'm passionate and very zealous about is men's work, because I know I've been that man on the couch, just watching too much TV, nobody calling me, going to work, coming back, not enjoying life at all, finding everything difficult. So I'm massively passionate about what we can do for men, because I think, and I'm not sure about in the States, but this is one of my real soapbox issues, is that small percentage of men who do damage to everybody. It's the road rage guy, it's the steroid man, it's the domestic violence man, and they do hideous, murderous things. It's a psychopathic CEO. Unfortunately, that casts a shadow over all men. Okay, we all get tarnished with that brush because they do hideous things, and they do it at the extremes. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be much appetite in the national conversation we have over here around the struggles that men have. And it's because of those guys, right? It starts at school, when you get the bullies rocking around. He's got his little mates with him. You don't want to be shamed about, your shoes or your haircut or something, or you don't want to be punched. So you shut up and you don't say anything. And that enables those men to carry on through life and create that damage. So I'm deeply passionate about readjusting how men are viewed, because most of us, and we do live with privilege, I will say that as a man, we live with privilege, but most of us are good guys, right? But we're not always portrayed at that way. I see in the headlines in the newspapers, man kills woman or man kills family. It's like, oh, again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that has a little impact on me when I see that as a man. Yeah. So I'm pretty passionate.
I see, and I love it. I'm loving it. I have a question. So you've been doing this for a while. You said up to 66 tables. Can you think of an unexpected discovery you've come with, maybe about masculinity, doing this about 5 years or so, 3 years of doing these tables? Have you discovered something about masculinity that you really didn't think you would have found by talking to all these men, hearing all these stories? Is there some new discovery that you've come up with or found?
Yeah, I think the thing is that more than a place to tell their stories, men want to be properly heard. So men want to be listened to, and I'm not telling. We get men sometimes who, they'll start talking about steam engines, and 10 minutes later you're like, I have no interest in this. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is boring. Okay. So I'm thinking that in my head. Isn't that awful? But we talk about the art of elegantly interrupting. How do you elegantly interrupt somebody to get them talking about what is really important to them? Because that really is, that's okay. They're interested in it, but nobody else is. So what I've learned is men will often not talk about what's really going on for them because I think they felt that they've never really properly been heard. So I talk about how information is received. So, for instance, if a man in a relationship with a female gets a bit wobbly and things aren't going well, and if he starts to cry, quite often, I would imagine, I don't have any stats on this, but I would imagine the female can go, well, come on, you're the man here. You're not meant to be doing this. But the thing so it's really about being heard. Men want to be heard, but men have to be brave enough to access that courage. The other thing I suppose I've learned is how stuck men are. Most men are stuck. They're just really stuck with it. There's lots of stuff. Really, the influence of fathers is just massive. So we talk about generational trauma, and it affects everybody. Let's specifically talk about men. Is how grandfathers and then fathers and then sons and then their children will carry on the same destructive patterns, the generational trauma. I also look at the other side of it, where I was blessed to have an amazing grandfather. Like, he was full of social justice. He was very, very active in it, and it washed down to my dad. It washed down to me, and hopefully it'll wash down to my son as well. So along with generational trauma, there's the other side of where we've been blessed, right, with these people. So bit rambly there. I'm rambling a bit, but really let's bring it back to what I've learned most is men want to be heard. And they need to take that opportunity to be heard properly about what is really going on for them.
Okay. Has the experience of doing these tables affected how you raise your son?
It's affected me not just with my son, my whole life. We're always learning about this, but every single meeting we have at the men's table, and we've grown, we've got like, I don't know what it is, 12 people full-time and part-time now. It's gone nuts. Every single meeting we start off with a check-in. Every single time we will run a check-in, and at the end of the meeting we run a check-out as well. How are we going? What are we coming to this meeting with? I'm very conscious with my son that I'm always very close to him and asking him how he's going, and he is very open with me, and I think that it's worked that way. We hug, we tell each other, that really, really difficult phrase, which is, I love you, it's still, I do it and I genuinely mean it, but still for me, I'm a bit like, okay, yep, but I do love you. It almost doesn't come naturally to men, and I'm quite an open man. So, it's, so I hope it has, but also it's affected me in my relationships and how I deal with people. And I will listen to people. I give them enough time to talk about, but I will always dig in. And quite often I will say, but what's going on here? How do you feel about this? And that gives a chance to open up a whole different conversation. Yeah.
I like that. Okay. The final letter In the word prize, we still have one more that we're going to go back to, but the last letter in the word prize is E, and the word is expectation. Expectation is defined as a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. So you talked about what you're experiencing now, and how this is not going to last forever. Times change, things will change. When at some point maybe you're not going to be as big a part of this, or maybe when you've moved on or do something else, what do you see for yourself after the tables? Maybe when you're not as involved, what will you be doing afterwards?
I'll always be doing men's work. Always. That will be until I can't do it anymore, because it has been for me the most rewarding thing I've ever done. By far. We've seen, and for example, if I think about some of the men who come to the table, and let's say they're a 2 out of 10 at that time, if they move to a 4 out of 10, that's a great result. Okay, it's a great result. That gives me passion, that gives me purpose, that thrills me. We see men coming to tables and then after the end of the night, they physically look lighter and what have you. So that stuff is really exciting. Men's work will always be what I do. I'm suddenly not going to run off and, I don't know, sell carpets or whatever it is. It's never going to happen. I because of the way I am with my ADHD, David, my co-founder, who 2019 called me and said, hey, we should do more of this. Thank God he's systems and process, because I'm not. And it does work well. We bump into each other occasionally, but I would imagine that at some stage when I'm not involved in the organization, I'll be on the speaking circuit talking about men's issues, getting it out to a wider audience. The statistics down here are, and I think they're pretty much global, is that 75% of suicides are male. Yep. We have phenomenal amount of men who underachieve at school. We have boys who underachieve at school. The prisons are jam-packed full of men. And yet all the stats, and we see very little money flowing into men's resources and men's health. So I'm a big advocate for that, and I'll be talking to government. I talk to government. I hassle people about governments, about men, and what's actually happening for men. If we get happy, connected men, so one of our taglines is, and it's on my hoodie actually, on the back of my hoodie, is healthy men, healthy masculinities, healthy communities. So we believe if you've got those things lined up, you will have a better community to live in. If you've got happy, connected men who are going out, getting involved in their own community, and doing their own thing, helping other people, it will be a better place. So if I can encourage that in any way or form, it's always going to be men's work. It always will be. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Can I ask, have you gotten any backlash from doing these men's tables? From men, from women, from anyone? Has there anybody who's found something negative and something as beautiful as this?
We get very little backlash, very, very little. Our biggest supporters are women. Okay, we get 40 to probably 50% of all men who come and sit at a table have been referred to a table by a woman. And that's the men who own up to it, right? So there's probably, I reckon it's higher than that. It's phenomenal, the care and the love that the women have for the men in their lives that they know and want them to help. On the other side of that, we know that a man can be a woman in a man's life can become the only emotional outlet for that man. So the woman at home will be like, I'm hearing these stories again and again. Why don't you go out and find some of the men to talk to? So the woman's like, oh, this is, come on. So we've got I can guarantee we are always received when we go and talk to agencies, when we go and talk to government, when we go and talk to various different organizations, we're always received very, very well. It's been an open door. We've had a couple of times where we've had just a few women say, well, this is sexist. This isn't like, this is, no, it's not. It's not sexist at all. In fact, we are creating better men by doing this. So we've had a couple of knockbacks. And then again, on social media, the biggest people who we have problems with are some men. So some men are real detractors where they will say, oh, do you all sit down to pee? Do you know, it's all feminized. It's all, oh, you're trying to do what women are doing. Oh, boo-hoo. And it's that stupid little comments. And obviously they're the men who could do with this stuff the most. Mm-hmm. I mean, these men have had some trauma in their life that has created them that way. And that's where a bit of compassion comes in. But we've had a couple of men, and I've been trolled really nastily once by one guy, and it was actually quite affected me. So we have very little pushback, very, very little pushback. There is a recognition within society that something needs to change for men. We're still trying to create that big conversation. It's not the appetite's not quite there, but people know it's there. But overall, it gets really, we've been hugely accepted, which is great.
That's good. That's good. The middle letter in the word prize is I, and I don't associate that with a word. I associate it with the men that I speak to. So in this case, the I is you, Mr. Hughes. When we take away the shackles, all the things that men are, when we're not husbands or fathers or employees or best friends or anything else other than ourselves. So for you, when you are just Ben and you're not anything else, who are you?
Wow. Stripping away everything, eh? Wow. That's such a powerful question, isn't it? You really need to think about that. Who am I? I am right now, I'll talk about right now. I'm 56 and I'm suddenly thinking, how the hell did I get to 56? I'm 57 next month. I'm like, what? That's way too quick, right? So this is, if I want to talk about I'm going to talk about how I feel right now. I've been looking at the skin on my legs. I'm going, I've got old men's skin suddenly. I'm like, what? I still can remember when I was at school. Come on, this can't be right. So if I took, I have a very playful nature. I can be, I take what I do very seriously, but I do it in a casual way, if that makes sense, because I think it's really important to engage men with humor. So I love humor. I love comedy. I can be, I jokingly say my two big strengths are sarcasm and flippancy. So, so I can say the wrong things now and again, but I always do it with, there's a bit of care there. But me as a man, I'm suddenly thinking, wow, I'm 56, I'm old. There's the whole sex thing that comes into it. Suddenly I'm 56, I'm an older man now, and it's just like all those things come into play. So just for me, there's been a bit of a questioning around how did I get here suddenly? I'm English originally. Okay. A couple of Monday nights ago, I found myself here in Launceston, which is at the bottom end of the world, right, in Tasmania, eating an Asian meal. And then I went to see a Hungarian movie with subtitles. I'm like, wow, my world is kind of weird, right? How did that happen? So yeah, look, my eye is I love people. I've always had I love being with people. I get my energy from people. I'm an extrovert around that. So yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Okay. So doing the tables and this men's work that you do, has your partner commented to you about maybe a change in you? How has this affected you? Has there been a change that people can see, like something blatant about you, maybe the way you act, the way you look, anything that people have seen a change because of what you do?
Yeah, I actually went for a walk this morning with a good friend down here, and he said, I mean, this is another thing about getting old. I slipped over and fell over. I was like, I was sitting on the floor and on the floor thinking, oh God, I feel old. But he said, you are a very different person from even how you were 5, 6 years ago when I was slugging away trying to make money. The aim of what I was doing was to make money, okay, being self-employed. And I wasn't very good at it. But I found my purpose now. I found my purpose. The way I talk to people is probably different. I'm more compassionate because I know that people walk around with this stuff going on for them. So I'm more compassionate now than I've ever been. And we live in a world where compassion seems to be a little bit in short supply at the moment. So we all need, and I think the world's going to be a tougher place over the next 10 years, which is very, it makes me very sad. But the biggest thing, the actual most practical thing is when I talk about the no fixing and I talk about people hijacking other people's stories. I will call out people. If somebody's talking, then somebody will go, oh, somebody else will jump in, and I'll call that out. I'll call that out when people do it to me. And I will literally, we have a few that can be a bit awkward, but I'm like, I didn't finish. I needed to get out what I was saying. So that's one big thing that's changed for me.
Okay. So thank you for answering all the questions in the prize mantra that I came with. I really appreciate you that. Few random questions that I like to end with, but you answered a lot of them through your talking, but I'm just going to throw them out there anyway.
I can talk.
No, hey, that's good. No, podcasters, we like a talker. You make it easy.
Yeah.
No problem with that. I want to ask you, what are you, if there is anything, what are you afraid of that you cannot control?
I am afraid of great inequality in the world. That's what I'm really afraid of. 2 days ago, it drove me mad. I was so angry. 2 days ago on the radio, we had the head of a big bank down here announcing their annual profits, which was $9.55 billion. Okay, $9.55 billion. And then he went on to tell everybody that interest rates were going up, inflation was going up, and everything's going to be really tough for people. And this guy, it was almost like he had no idea of what he just said about the profit, and then what he carried on to say. The next article on the radio was about the food banks. And they were struggling to get volunteers to hand out food to the poor people, and struggling to get food. And I fear there's a great inequality that's always been in the world, but I just feel it's become more pronounced over the last 3, 4, 5 years. I also greatly fear for people who have swallowed I won't go into politics, but who have swallowed ideas that actually don't benefit them. They follow people who say one thing, but completely actually behind the scenes act in another way, and it doesn't benefit. Let's call them the working class person. So I feel real. I worry about that. I worry about the inequality, and yeah.
What are you afraid of that you can control?
I used to suffer a lot with depression and anxiety, and I don't anymore. Part of that is exercise. That is such a great brain tonic. Just getting out, and I urge anybody, come and visit Tasmania. I know you want to go and see the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House in Sydney, but Tasmania is such a beautiful place that I can get out in nature very quickly. And when I am feeling a little bit, I can go for a walk. And I have two phrases that I used this morning that I use a lot. This first one is, my best years are still to come. Even though I'm 56, I will always have throw that positive thing out, because I think about people who've had great success early in their lives and they're like, well, it's all downhill from here. Well, no, it doesn't have to be. So my best years are still to come. Think positive, okay? The other one is, I'm going to do a 180. So when things are a bit tough and I'm feel a bit down or what have you, I literally go, okay, what's the 180 here? How can I turn this? What's the positive stuff here? What's good in my life? And it seems a bit trite and a bit naff, so kind of saying that stuff, but it does work. So yeah, exercising those two sayings, those how I can control a little bit.
Okay. All right. My last question is this, but I think I know the answer, but I'm interested to hear your response to this. A lot of men, one of the reasons I started this podcast is because men don't talk, and I wanted to encourage men to talk. And I figured the best way to do it was for them to hear other men talking, which is why I'm loving you as a guest. My question is kind of wrapped around this. A lot of men want to talk. We have a lot to say. We're not comfortable with who we get to say it to. Mm-hmm. So I ask every man this. Do you have a friend who you could pick up the phone and call right now, who would listen to you rant and rave about maybe the dumbest thing you've ever done? You don't know why you did it, but somebody you feel comfortable enough with, safe enough with, to just spew the whatever you've done, and knowing that at the end of the conversation, he may tell you were wrong, agree with you, but when you're done speaking to him, you feel better because you're able to get it out. Do you have that person in particular?
I do. I also have a table where can go, and I can once a month I can go, and there's a diverse range of men there, a very diverse range of men. But I can literally go and put it on the table. Nobody needs to fix me or say anything afterwards, but at least I've got it out there. So yes, I do, and that's why I talk about community. Get yourself into a community. Almost doesn't matter what it is, but go and find a community where you can talk. I would take the courage as a man, to open up and start a conversation and continue to have those conversations. So I'm blessed. I'm lucky that I do. I've always been that way anyway, because I'll takes me ages to walk down the road, talk to cats, dogs, whoever. But it's I do have that. But I would encourage all men to have the courage to start talking about how they feel, because you will lighten your load and you'll be amazed the reception you will get. Yeah.
I like it. Thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who listened. I usually do this at the beginning, but I was so ready to talk with you, I just kind of shot through my intro. But this is a reminder to every man who listens. I'm not trained. I can't diagnose. I can't do anything of the sort. What I am is just a man who likes to see and hear other men speak. And that's what this is. But if nothing else, I hope you gain the courage to find someone to talk to get your emotions out. That's the reason that I do this podcast. And I hope every guest that I speak to, especially Mr. Hughes here, I hope this really brings out the desire to speak. So keep that in mind. Thank you to Kristen McGriff. She does the intro and the outro for this podcast. Most of all, thank you to all the listeners of this podcast, listening to Men of the Prize, where your inner monologue is revealed. I'll see you next week. You have a good one.